So this talk is a little different than any other talks that I have given because I am going to be talking about something I don't know much about. It also has a rather misleading title, and that was intentional because I wanted people to come and listen to the talk, so I had to give it a title that would make them think it was going to be something they wanted to learn about. Power Tips for Improving Teaching and Learning at Home. However, it has absolutely nothing to do with curriculum or pedagogy or academics or teaching any kind of language function or anything like that. And the reason I wanted to do this talk is because I have experienced in my own life tremendous lifestyle transformation and improvements. If any of you have seen any old videos of me, you might know that I am a little lighter than I was once upon a time. And for a while, people were like, "Are you okay? You look thin." And I said, "No, I'm good. I am way better." But I've been fascinated by all of the things I'm going to share with you in this talk. And I will admit right up front, I am not an expert, and I don't have any formal training in this other than hundreds of hours of podcast listening, multiple book reading, and a lot of research, because this has been one of the things that has interested me the most in the last 5 years, really. So we will launch in. And to give you the kind of overview, we're going to talk about how to improve energy levels, brain function, and emotional stability. I think you would agree that if you have good energy, better brain function, and good emotional stability and condition, you are likely to teach better. Agreed? Yes. And if your children have better energy, brain function, and emotional stability, they are likely to learn better. So we're going to talk about these 5 areas by which you can leverage certain things to improve energy and brain function and emotional stability, starting with light and sleep, air and breath, movement, food and fasting, and environment. So again, nothing to do with what we typically would think of as home schooling or teaching in a classroom, but I have long noted when I'm teaching, if I am in good condition, if I have slept well, if I am feeling good, if I am eating well and have good energy and clarity of mind, my teaching is so much better. And if I am not that way, I probably should just not bother teaching and kick the kids outside to go play ultimate frisbee or something. So I think this has lots of applications for us as teachers of other people's children, parents, teachers of our own children, teachers in schools. And I start with light and sleep. This woman, Katie Wells, she's a homeschooling mom. I believe she lives in Florida somewhere. I bumped into her when she was a guest on some other podcast I was listening to, and I liked what she was saying so much that I started listening to her podcast, and I learned a little bit more about her background. And I then had her, I called her up, I said, "Would you please be a guest on my podcast? Because I would like to know what you think from all of your, decades of studying this now, are the most helpful things that you know to help make teaching and learning easier in the homeschool." And so she was on my podcast. It's available. You can listen to it. It was a delightful episode. Hers is Wellness Mama. And like most podcasts, some are a little more interesting than others. But I asked her, of all the things you know, what would you put at the top, like the number one most useful thing? And it wasn't what I expected her to say, because she talked about light and the incredible importance of morning light and how this affects us so profoundly in ways we would never imagine. And it sets us up for a better day and a better sleep and a better life. So evidently, if you get bright light as soon as possible after you wake up, it does something very beneficial for your energy level and attentiveness. And it stimulates a release of cortisol. Cortisol is a hormone, and it's sometimes referred to as the stress hormone, but that's only one part of what cortisol does. And like all hormones, they need to be in balance and in cycle for them to do what we benefit from them doing. When they're out of balance and out of cycle, we suffer. So when you get bright light in the early morning, it stimulates the cortisol, and it's not just in your eyes. This was a fascinating thing I learned, is that every cell in our bodies has photoreceptors. So it's not just bright light that we perceive with our eyes, it's on the skin, it's the whole body senses the light. And so it stimulates the cortisol, which then gives us the get up and go energy that we want to have to do whatever we're trying to do with the best energy as possible. Unfortunately, a lot of people do not do this. In fact, I think for many years, I probably never thought about getting outside early in the morning because I was too busy. And you get up and then you do whatever you have to do, and you're mostly indoors. If you're homeschooling, it's like, okay, eat breakfast, okay, get out those math books, okay, let's do this. Or, the kids have a little bit of light getting into the car, and then they go to a school, and then they sit in the school, and, they get some recess. But they're not getting that early morning bright light that's so powerful. And sometimes we think, well, it's not sunny. Actually, that doesn't matter nearly so much, because even on a cloudy day, the light outside is qualitatively much better and brighter, and it has a more full spectrum than you will ever get from indoor lighting of any sort. And of course, most of our indoor lighting has become worse over time because of the decline of the basic incandescent light bulb. So now we're suffering artificial light problems that are worse than they were previously. So, most important thing to do, kick your kids out of the house as soon as they wake up and make them stay out there for 20 minutes or so. And if you live somewhere cold, well, put on some coats. And if you live somewhere hot, well, then the boys can take off their shirt, the girls can wear shorts. Ideally, you get them outside barefoot, because then there's the improved benefit of grounding that happens when your bare feet are touching the earth. And I won't get into that in too much detail, but there are entire books written on the benefits of grounding. The other thing, though, that this does when you get early morning bright light is that it sets your clock for melatonin release, right? So ideally, what you want is increased cortisol, right, in the morning, and then you kind of ride on this cortisol through the day, and then as the sun goes down, it declines, and with the decline, the melatonin rises. And then you have the benefits of melatonin, which go far beyond just sleep. Melatonin helps with immune system function. It helps with the kind of sleep that you get. And so that's ideal. The problem most people have is that they don't get the bright light. They need something that will stimulate the cortisol. Thus, coffee is of huge benefit, because you get in the coffee this release of the caffeine, which has this artificial effect of blocking your adenosine receptors, which causes you to think that you're not tired. That's what coffee does. It tricks your brain into thinking that you're not tired. Even though you probably are, you're not. But if you get the cortisol, you don't need the coffee to cause the cortisol increase, And so it's a more natural, sustained release of cortisol, whereas the coffee kind of goes up and down and up and down. Thus, we find ourselves, drinking coffee at 3 o'clock for various reasons. That interferes with sleep because the half-life of caffeine varies from, 3 to 12 hours, depending on your metabolism, which is mostly a genetic thing. But so often people will keep drinking coffee in order to sustain energy, only that is now going to interfere with sleep at night. And then the melatonin didn't get released, and you have all sorts of challenges there. So I thought that was very convenient. Kids wake up, kick them outside. Now, hopefully you live in a place where you can safely do this. Not everybody does, right? Some people live in apartment buildings or neighborhoods where you just don't have a backyard that you can do it. But even a little bit of just being out on the porch and eating breakfast outside or something when it's not too cold will be very helpful in this regard. So that's the first thing that she talked about. Another thing is that you get from sunlight on the skin, you get the production of vitamin D. Now, vitamin D is not actually a vitamin in the same sense that vitamin C is a vitamin. Vitamin D is actually a hormone, and it's produced by your body, like all your hormones. And what activates vitamin D production is sunlight on the skin, more than pretty much anything else. And this is why the sunlight has a positive impact on your immune system and your energy level, because the vitamin D is essential for mitochondrial health. And the mitochondria, as we all remember, the single one thing we learned in biology in high school that stuck out was powerhouse of the cell. But there's actually many, many, many mitochondria in each cell. So the little diagram with the nucleus and the mitochondria, some of your cells, heart cells, for example, have thousands of mitochondria. And so when you can get good metabolic health and mitochondrial health, you will have just better cellular function. And that's going to be true even, for brain function and vision and, all of our sensory perceptions are going to be better. If you take what they sell and call vitamin D, it's not really vitamin D. It's a nutritional precursor to creating vitamin D, but it is qualitatively not the same as the vitamin D that you produce from sufficient exposure to sunlight. At least this is what I have heard from many different seemingly reliable sources. Now, we have an interesting problem in our world today with many different forms of artificial light, and some of it is particularly not useful in terms of helping lower the cortisol, smooth the melatonin, and calm us down and get us ready for sleep. And this would be blue light in particular. Now, I remember the first time hearing about blue light being so bad for sleep, and I didn't know what it was. And so for years, I just thought, well, okay, blue light's bad, and it comes from screens. But I didn't ever know why it was bad until I learned. And I find this really interesting. So when the sun rises, it's being filtered through the largest amount of atmosphere. And the atmosphere filters out blue light, right? Then when the sun sets, it's filtered through and it filters out blue light. It's when the sun is at the zenith that the least amount of atmosphere is there filtering it. And so that's where the most blue light comes through. It's a spectrum of light that is not filtered as much by the atmosphere in the middle of the day. So when the photoreceptors of your body detect blue light, it kind of communicates to your cells, it's the middle of the day. you should be alert and busy. Now, if you're watching movies or working on your computer or looking at screens at night, it's confusing your body because the blue light emanating from the screen is telling you, okay, it's middle of the day, but your body should be saying it's about time to wind down and get some good, meaningful rest. And that is why all of these experts are saying try to avoid using screens for at least an hour before you want to go to bed. Some people push it a little bit harder, like 2 hours. It is hard to do. It is really hard not to look at a screen almost until right before you go to bed. It's just the way life is. But I think that we can, of course, attend to this with our children and maybe try a little bit on our own to just say, okay, I'm gonna turn off that phone, I'm gonna turn off that computer, I'm gonna turn off that 96-inch screen that we have, at least an hour before I want to go to sleep, and pull out a book, try and find a nice incandescent type of light, lower the lights in the house, and prepare yourself. And it's a more natural thing. That's the way, people were originally without electricity at all. If they had light, it was candles, lanterns, campfires, things that were small and glowy and amberish colored. In fact, I know a couple people who are strongly recommending that you, and I haven't not gone this far, although I dream about it, equipping your home with amber lights. And then around sunset, you turn off all the overhead lights and you have amber lights down low in your house and you turn those on and then you just function for a while. And since there's nothing to do and you can't read, you go to sleep earlier. But I have noticed that if I do this, if I just start turning lights off around whenever sunset is, which right now here it's about 8-ish, right? And just let it get darker, I go to sleep faster and I sleep better. Unfortunately, not everyone in my house likes this idea. So I start turning lights off and then other people start turning them back on and then I have to go turn them off again and we have this little light dance going. But I do believe that if you want to get your kids calm, one of the best things you can do is just get as many lights off and get, yellowish or amber or candle light type of light for the last, period, whatever you can get away with, hour, half hour, even probably 15 minutes would be good. Some of this I learned from a guy named Andrew Huberman. He is a professor of ophthalmology and neurology at Stanford University. I really like his podcast. I don't listen to every one of them. He's very, very scientific, but on this subject of light and sleep, he's got a tremendous amount of research. This book by Matthew Walker, Why We Sleep, if there's one book I wish I could have read 20 years before I did, this would be the book. This is on the top 5 books that have influenced my life. And unfortunately, I spent a long time believing that if I slept more than 5-6 hours max, I was lazy. And so I pretty much chronically shorted myself on sleep from about the age of 35 to 55. And I'm convinced that if I had read this book and changed my life and valued sleep then the way I do now, I would be smarter, happier, less likely to get anything like Alzheimer's or cancer, and I would have been a lot nicer to all of my children and a better husband too. So if you have issues like that, like you're shorting yourself on sleep because you have so much to do, you're building a business, you have all these responsibilities, just read the book. The audiobook is very well done. Matthew Walker is a brilliant guy. And one little thing in that book was so helpful for me to understand teenagers. Because evidently what happens with sleep cycles, and this is true in every culture for as long as it has been observed, so it's not a modern phenomenon. Teenagers, right around puberty, their circadian rhythm shifts, and they are no longer able to go to sleep as early as they could when they were younger. They are compelled by their biology to stay up later at night. Now, he hypothesizes, and this is true even in Aboriginal cultures, he hypothesizes this is because that's a period of time where they have to become more independent from adults. And they often would do this in groups, and so you'd see teenagers spending time together in groups at night, later in the evenings, and the parents, they don't want to stay up that late anymore, so they're willing to go to bed earlier, go to sleep. But this is so the teenagers get this level of, independence and relationship, blah, blah, blah. But then what we do in our modern schedule is we force them to get up really early so that they can eat breakfast, get dressed, get on a bus, and be at school by 8 o'clock. And so most teenagers who go to school are sleep deprived most of the time. And one little trivia in this book I found very interesting. A particular town, is Illinois or Indiana, I can't remember, they shifted the start time for high school 45 minutes later, and they found a 10% decrease in teen driving crashes, which statistically is better than, better brakes, right? I mean, that's a significant improvement because they weren't quite so sleep deprived. Now, if you're homeschooling, the good news is you don't have to get up so early to get on the bus. And, the girls, it's worse because they got to spend an hour and a half, fixing their face and figuring out what to wear. The boys can just kind of roll out of bed and, sleep on the bus. But I think we would do well to consider during this high growth time, they need more sleep to develop brains and muscles. They're growing very fast. And figuring out how can we work with this so that they will be able to go to sleep. And I remember being teenagers like, I can't sleep. Right? Do you remember that? It's like 11:30 at night. I can't sleep. What am I supposed to do? Go to sleep? I can't. So interesting little trivia in that book. So much more. There's a little bit of weird evolution stuff about how we all came from sea creatures and blue light and all that. But, for the most part, I found the science really solid and the application of it very, very helpful and useful. Now, air and breath. We don't think a lot about breathing. We kind of just breathe, and we don't necessarily have a lot of choice about what we breathe. However, we do know for a fact that our world today is definitely polluted to some degree. So a lot of the things we put in our house, especially if we put in something new, whether it's new carpet or new drapes or a new mattress or a whole new house that just got built or remodeled, there's a lot of this outgassing that occurs. And so we have a lot of essentially toxic things in the air that we're breathing. We also seem to have a lot of places where mold is a problem. And I don't know that mold is a particularly new problem. In fact, I wonder if, a lot of people didn't just die from breathing too much mold once upon a time. But we do have the idea of being able to filter the air. And I think it is worth maybe looking into, should we get an air filter? If not, for the whole house, maybe in the area where you spend most of the time, living and eating and cooking and doing homework or whatnot. We also know that nasal breathing is particularly important for good health. And most people, and I'm looking around the room here, most of you have your mouth closed. unless you're going to talk or smile. But, stereotypically, you do see kind of the open mouth look. You react to that, like there's something not quite right about a person whose mouth is open all the time. And one of the things that is so good about breathing through your nose is that it stimulates nitric oxide production in your blood. You get more nitric oxide in your blood. And nitric oxide is one of these hugely important molecules. It's a gas. Its half-life is very, very short, but it helps transport the oxygen and nutrients that you need, and it improves blood flow, which improves brain function, which improves immune system, which also gives you a better pump at the gym. And so you see now a lot of people kind of pushing nitric oxide supplements in some areas. But the easiest way to get better nitric oxide is breathe through your nose, hum. Humming actually stimulates nitric oxide production. And then eating food that's heavy in the precursors, like arugula, for example, will stimulate nitric oxide production. Also, the more your mouth is open, the less saliva you produce, and the more saliva you do produce is better dental health. So nasal breathing also promotes better dental health. This is why I think a lot of parents historically have said to their kids, close your mouth. There could be other reasons for that as well, but there is that old saying, children should be seen. I like to hear children, but so there's that aspect of it. And then there are the ways in which you breathe that can actually exercise and improve your diaphragm and overall cardiovascular function. And so we often don't think about how we breathe, but there's an interesting phenomenon that when the ratio of your breathing out is different, you get a different effect. So in-breath is for the sympathetic nervous system. That's the part that kind of causes that energy to increase. And when you breathe in quickly, or when you breathe in slowly, you're activating the sympathetic nervous system, and then you breathe out quickly, right? So if you breathe in slowly, this would be like in martial arts, they do the ki, or if you're pushing weights around or doing something extreme, you'll often grunt to push out a lot of air quickly. That activates the sympathetic nervous system. Whereas if you reverse it and you breathe out more slowly, then you activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the kind of relax and regroup feeling. And so you can actually practice breathing for a particular effect. Now, most people don't think much about how long is their in-breaths compared to their out-breaths. But you can practice this a little bit, and one way to do this is to practice like a box breathing. This has an immediately calming effect. It activates the vagus nerve, and it activates the parasympathetic rest, relax, calm, regroup system. So let's just try a little bit, because you might not have tried any intentional breathing recently. I have been really interested in this for a couple years. And I have determined that it is very useful to be able to know when to breathe in a particular way for a particular benefit. So first we can try the box breathing, which is you breathe in for 4 counts, you hold it for 4 counts, you breathe out for 4 counts, and then you hold out for 4 counts. And because some of you may be new to this, we'll go fairly quick counts, right? Okay, so we'll breathe in, 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Out, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Again, in, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Out, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. So you could continue that for several minutes. And what you would discover, most likely, is that you are calming your system and possibly getting warmer. If you're cold, you can improve your body temperature by breathing this way. Also, one thing is when you hold your breath on the out, when you have the negative hold, it stimulates a expansion of your vascular system, actually your capillaries, and all the way down into your almost microscopically small blood vessels. And it stimulates because the concentration of carbon dioxide is increasing. So by having more carbon dioxide in your body, it expands your capillaries. Then when you breathe in, you get the oxygen and it goes into these expanded vascular system, and you get more oxygen into your tissues. So breath holding is actually quite helpful for increasing your CO2 tolerance, which then actually increases the expansion of of oxygen in the blood to the organs. When we worked with, when I was at Philadelphia at the Institutes for the Achievement of Human Potential, we worked with children who had seizures. And one of the things that was programmed for children who had seizures was masking. So they would rebreathe their own carbon dioxide for up to 90 seconds and work up to it. And then when you take off the mask, they're breathing pretty heavily. And then because the capillaries are all expanded, they're getting more oxygen in the blood to the brain tissues. Seizures are generally caused by a lack of oxygen to the brain. And so it's a lack of oxygen. And then the brain says, okay, we got to shut things down because we get all the oxygen so we can survive because we're the most important thing. Without us, you'd be nothing. And to a degree, the brain cells are right about that. You can experiment with different patterns. 4 in, 8 out. Try that. It's a little bit different feeling. Ready? In, 2, 3, 4. Out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Is that hard? You can practice that. If that becomes easy, you can go 6, 12. And when I'm preparing to sleep, I will usually do, I don't know how many cycles, but a few dozen cycles of 6, 12 or 4, 12. So breathe in and then very slow out. And another thing that helps is singing, chanting, and humming. When you think about singing, what do you have to do? Take a quick breath in, and then you have to regulate the out breath for the duration of the phrase that you're trying to sing. Chanting and humming do the same thing. So not only does the humming improve the nitric oxide production, the singing and chanting also regulates, it activates the parasympathetic nervous system. So if you're in a class or you've got your kids and they're getting a little hyper and you want them to calm down, just sing a little bit and you will be amazed at how that singing helps to down-regulate the anxious energy level. Breath by James Nestor, and he did all sorts of research, traveled around the world, interviewed biology and physiology experts, and came up with this set of information. So you get lots of benefits from breath. Let's talk about movement. This is also something, it's very interesting. I just saw an advertisement for a seminar on classical PE. I thought, someone should have done this. I'm glad someone is. I don't know what they're going to say, but I think we very, very underestimate the importance and power of movement in learning and overall well-being. One podcaster that I listened to, I liked kind of the idea. I didn't like all of what he said about it, but he said the 3 M's for the morning: mindfulness, movement, and mindset, right? So, what does that mean for you? In my case, mindfulness would be kind of prayer. And so starting with prayer. And I have a plan these days where I alternate a prayer with some push-ups and another prayer and some squats and another prayer and some more push-ups. And I'm doing this thing where you have to add a push-up every day. And so by the end of the year, I will have, future perfect tense, hopefully on January or December 31st, accomplished 365 push-ups in that one day. Not all at once, just over the day. But it's a good challenge, and I've done it before. But this kind of alternating for me. And then mindset is, this idea of take a little time and plan out what you're hoping to accomplish. Think through, like visualize and imagine what your day is going to be like, rather than just charging into it, saying, well, we'll just survive. So this helps with all these areas of circulation, breath, digestion, alertness. I do believe that I certainly, for a long time, did have no idea about the benefits of resistance training and muscle mass. Having more muscle mass is actually the most significant thing you can do for health span, right? So there's lifespan, like how long are you going to live? And a big chunk of that is genetic. Health span is how long do you live healthy until you die, right? And it's not good. Most Americans, we're probably like one of the most, if not the unhealthiest of the developed countries in the world, even though we spend way more than everybody else on medical care. And as I got more aware of how muscle mass is so beneficial, one aspect is it's the best glucose sink that you can have. So the more muscle mass you have, the more glucose your body can absorb. Therefore, the less insulin you have to produce to store the excess glucose, right? And so you actually can store more glucose, and less likely will it turn into fat than if you don't have as much muscle mass. The other thing that we know is that it actually functions somewhat like an organ in that it contributes to the overall health of the whole system, right? It promotes better hormone balance. So the more muscle mass you have, the better hormone balances you'll have. And one of the really bad things that I discovered way too late in life is that you will start to lose muscle around 35 or 40 years old if you don't do anything different. It's a really ugly word, sarcopenia. It just sounds bad, doesn't it? Sarcopenia. It's the loss of muscle. It's age-related muscle loss. And so I truly wish that I had gotten into this at a younger age, because at a certain point, you can't really ever get back to what you could have had if you had started earlier and better. But it is, and one guy, Peter Attia, he made this claim. He said, muscle mass is, in older age, in terms of health span, is way more important than anything else you can do. In fact, more muscle mass is more important than not smoking, if you can believe that, in terms of longevity and health. So I do think that we should consider, okay, personally, how can I get some resistance training, body weight? Maybe you get some weights. Maybe you can get into a sport or activity that's going to stress you. But there's something about resistance training that is more effective than just being on a treadmill or doing aerobics or whatever. We also know that better movement allows for better neurological function, and that's partly circulation, partly respiration, and partly just has to do with overall energy transport in the body. Now, with food, What's the answer? No, actually, it's not. You are what you absorb, right? You can eat all sorts of things, but it's what you absorb that actually will go into building your tissues, building your bones, building your cells, building your brain, and all that. So, number one most important thing from my research indicates gut health is critical to everything. If we have a healthy microbiome, then we have the good bacteria, and we will have a very much improved immune function. And there's a really interesting connection in that neurons, which we use in our brain, are formed in a way, and neurotransmitters that allow neurons to work together, those neurotransmitters are actually formed in the digestive system. And so we want to have a healthy microbiome, but a lot of things interfere with a good microbiome. One of these is if you have a situation where you need to take a lot of antibiotics for some reason. Well, the antibiotics are antibiotic, so they kill the bacteria, both the good and the bad. You're trying to kill the bad ones to get over the disease, but the side effect is you kill many of the good bacteria that you need. Did you know, by the way, this blew my mind, this stat. I heard it. I have no reason to disbelieve it, but I can't personally prove it, but it's a weird thought. We have more bacteria in our bodies than we have cells that make up our bodies. We are just a bag of bacteria. So, antibiotics, antiseptics that we use, mouthwash, for example, is very damaging because it kills the bacteria in your saliva and in your mouth that actually helps the digestion of your food and the nitric oxide production when you eat foods that have nitric oxide precursors. So we would be good to stay away from antiseptics, anything that's going to kill too much bacteria. It's really interesting too because some studies show that kids who grow up with animals have overall better health than kids who don't. And one theory as to why this is true is they just get a much broader range of bacteria, both good and also developing resistance against the bad bacteria. So next time your kid is kissing the dog, just, that's great, kid. No problem there.
Wash your hands before dinner.
Yeah, wash your hands before dinner. But don't use antiseptic soaps, right? The other problem we have is a lack of fiber in the diet. Fiber is an essential prebiotic. So you have prebiotic, probiotic, and postbiotic. And without good fiber, then the probiotics that you might take, such as a lactobacillus supplement, or you eat your good yogurts or fermented foods like kimchi, sauerkraut, kombucha, they're not going to thrive as well without the fiber. And then, of course, we have, for the most part, foods in our diet that are very inflammatory and inhibit healthy bacteria growth, mostly your highly processed foods with a lot of chemical additives and things like that, which we will get into a little bit more here. So, improving gut health, evidently the best thing you can do is drink kefir. Ideally, you want to make it yourself and you don't want any sugar in it, which could make it a little bit hard to drink, but you could put in some fruit flavors or whatnot. Yogurt, I'm not a big fan really, but I have forced myself to eat it. The really funny thing though, once I started studying food, my actual preferences changed. Like I actually started to like and want and enjoy eating the things that were good for me, and I started to dislike and really not want to eat the things that were not good for me. Sauerkraut is absolutely in this category. 10 years ago, I would not have eaten sauerkraut except under threat, right? And now I eat it pretty much every day or twice a day, and I really like it. In fact, I just think about eating sauerkraut. My mouth starts to get all ready for it, you know? But any of those, and then if you take, a probiotic supplement, different kinds of bacteria strains and how many billions are in a pill and all that stuff. But probably the best source is going to be the natural fermented foods, kimchi, kombucha, natto, if anybody knows what that is. It's pretty awful stuff. It's fermented soybean paste. They eat it in Japan. And it has a really important chemical, I guess you call nattokinase, which is super good, but it's pretty hard to eat, I'll tell you that. One of the big problems I discovered is that we do not generally eat the right kind of oils. And I first heard about this when my daughter Julia, who is now, gosh, how old is she? 30-something. She's got 5 kids, so she has to be at least that. Anyway, she started studying this when she was about 16 years old. She could give me a half-an-hour lecture on omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids and what's the proper ratio. And I didn't understand much of it, but I've learned in the last few years. And it's really fascinating because, first of all, there's been an anti-fat in food going on for 40, 50 years, and it's completely misguided. The brain is mostly fat. So you actually need the right kind of fats to have good brain function. So a low-fat diet is actually not healthy for the heart, not healthy for the brain, not healthy for longevity and well-being, but the wrong kind of fats can really contribute to inflammation and other unwanted effects. So in what we would call the standard American diet, which initials are SAD, we are radically unbalanced and have way too much omega-6 and way not enough omega-3. So one of the things that we've tried to do in our family, and I've worked on a lot, is get the right balance going here. So with omega-3s, these are the ones that are really good for the brain. They're good for the immune system. You find them in salmon, sardines, fatty fish. And I did eat half a can of sardines last night. Not my favorite thing, but I know it's good for me, so I liked it. Fish oil will be good. You know, remember the old thing about cod liver oil? And mom, grandma used to give it to your mom when there's actually a lot of benefits in that cod liver oil. Fish roe, chia seeds, flax, walnut, macadamia nuts are one of the best sources of omega-3s in the vegetable world. And so those are ideal. What you don't want too much of is linoleic acid, the omega-6s, and mostly this is what you get if you buy food that contains oils of any sort. And you can read on the labels and it'll say vegetable oil, canola oil, corn oil, soybean oil, mixed vegetable oils. These are actually quite toxic. The way that these oils are made is a refining process that is even more complex and involved than refining gasoline from crude oil. And they have to basically wash it with toxic chemicals to extract oil, and then wash that with some less toxic chemicals to get rid of the toxins, and wash that with less toxic oil to get rid of that, and they have to keep going. And then the other huge problem is the oil that remains from the canola, soy, or corn, the seed oils, is completely stripped of any of the nutritional components that allow your body to absorb these oils. Whereas if you look at avocado or coconut, it's just mostly pressed out, and so it's much more absorbable. Well, what happens when you eat, oils that are not absorbable? They create inflammation. It creates immune system disorders. It creates pain. It creates worse brain function and all sorts of other problems that could lead into very degenerative and debilitating diseases. cancer, Alzheimer's, etc. But the problem is if you go into a restaurant, 99 times out of 100, they're cooking everything in vegetable oils. Anything you buy that's in a package and you read it and it has any kind of oil, these are all just very, very unnatural and harmful substances, which did not exist in the human diet at all until about 100 years ago. In fact, Crisco and margarine were waste products. And they figured out, how can we sell this stuff off? And if we make it yellow and say it's better than butter, everyone will buy it. And then you get really clever TV commercials. Like, I can't believe it's not butter. I can believe it. So, cooking oils to avoid, none of those. And if you want to upscale, and I think most of you have probably done this in your homes, is get yourself, avocado oils. Olive oil seems to be the highest in the polyphenols that are really healthful and good for you. Coconut oil, people have, different opinions about. I'm trying a new product, and I'm not sure whether I like it or not, but it's oil from algae oil. So we'll see. It doesn't really taste like anything. It's just a weird idea. And then butters, things like tallow and lard, as long as they come from reliably good sources. These are going to be overall better. And so as much as possible, try to get rid of the Wesson, get rid of the cooking oils, replace it with this. It's going to cost you a little bit more in terms of, per ounce, but it will be of much greater value for your health and the health of your kids. And then if you have to eat in restaurants, you have to eat in restaurants sometimes. I travel a lot, but I'm very suspicious. And I read the menu very carefully because I do want to keep as low as possible these unhealthy oils in my diet. With sugars and carbohydrates, we have the problem of blood glucose levels. And the standard American diet is very high in carbohydrates. In fact, do you remember the food pyramid? At the bottom is what? Yeah, grains, right? And so this whole idea of everyone should eat grains and cereals and breads and toast. And you get this particularly in the morning. And what happens is you have a large release of insulin to deal with all of this. But if you don't have, it's going to raise your blood sugar, and then the insulin has to bring it down. Well, what happens is when you get too much sugar in your blood, the insulin can't get it down. And so then it gets stored as fat. And the other problem is you get a blood sugar goes up very rapidly. So when you eat carbohydrates, your blood sugar goes up pretty rapidly, but then it comes down pretty rapidly, right? So then you have an energy low. So what do you have to do? Eat some more to get your blood sugar back up, and then it goes down, and so you have to eat some more. And so a lot of people are on this, up and down blood sugar extremes during the day, which is not good for energy, not good for health, creates insulin resistance, which makes it harder to, keep fat off. And for kids, you've noticed what sugar will do to them, right? And you don't want your kids like this. You want your kids nice and steady, right? You don't want these mood swings and brain fog and all of this. So ideally, you want to get as little refined sugars in the diet as possible, and then stick with more complex carbohydrates and fruit sugars, like from natural sources. Again, one of the problems is when you get things like high fructose corn syrup or white sugar even, it's stripped of the micronutrients that allow your body to absorb and process. And so you get these blood sugar. Then you follow that up with caffeine, and it gets even wilder and worse. So you could try an experiment. I mean, I like the whole world of people who try experiments on themselves and then tell me the results of what they experience. But I have tried zero sugar diet for an extended period of time. I have tried zero caffeine for an extended period of time. And what I find is that it's better. I don't necessarily continue that forever just because of the way life is. But try out and see, because some people are more sensitive and less sensitive. I have a fairly high caffeine metabolism, so I can drink more and I can drink it later, but some people don't. And that one of my daughters, for example, just 2 cups of coffee and she's dead. She's just completely non-functional. Not dead, the opposite of dead. She's animatedly dead. But stable glucose levels are an ideal to strive for. And so that's why in the morning, you would be best to feed your kids higher protein because it's more satiating. They won't be hungry as quickly, and their blood sugar won't spike up and down. It'll be a better, gentler curve. And I actually tried out one of these continuous glucose monitors you can put on, and you can see on your phone, okay, what foods made me go up or down for how long, and because we're all different. All of our bodies are different. Some people, may find that rice spikes that, but, sourdough doesn't. And other people might be the opposite. But you can experiment on yourself. But this problem of chronic inflammation through chronically high blood sugar levels is really at the source of almost all of our disease and discomfort in the modern health world. You want the fatty fish, salmon, sardines, mackerel, turmeric, pumpkin seeds. I try to eat some of those every day. In general, nuts, but not too many. Grass-fed beef, hugely more beneficial than commercially raised beef. Coffee actually has some polyphenols that are very helpful for brain function. Blueberries are practically on the absolute top of the list for having the antioxidants, right? Broccoli has sulforaphane, which is also very good for longevity. Dark chocolate, I think it only qualifies if it's like 90%. 85, the minimum. 90%, and if you're brave like me, 100% straight cacao. Bitter as all heck, but boy, it must be good for you if it tastes that bad. Eggs, olives and olive oil, pomegranate, also very high in antioxidants. I think pomegranate was on the very top of the list there. So, in terms of meats, I believe that as much as possible, we benefit hugely by eating grass-fed beef, naturally raised chicken. If you look at the concentrated animal feeding operations, is what it's called, CAFOs, most animals that we would get in a store or a restaurant are just packed full of antibiotics. They are raised in very unnatural, unhealthy conditions. Cattle that are fed grain, basically, the grain starts to disintegrate their whole digestive system because it's very unnatural, but they gain weight faster. And so most commercially raised cattle, it's a really delicate formula, like how sick can they get before it eats a hole in their stomach and then you can't sell them. So they basically feed them grain as much as possible, kill them at just the right time before they would get sick from it. So I would say grass-fed is your best way to go. Yes, it costs more, but it's probably better to eat less of something that's better than more of something that's got potential problems there. What else? You got conjugated linoleic acids, glutathione, antioxidants. You've got better mineral content. If you get ranched eggs that are organic and not grain-fed chickens, but more free-range chickens, they're going to have better choline in the yolks, which is really an essential nutrient for brain function. And you don't want, BHT is bovine growth hormone. You don't want hormones in the meats that you're eating. So, all right, here are a few of my favorites. This book, Eat to Beat Disease by William Li. That's what got me started on this whole thing. And in there was some recipes, and there was a recipe of purple potato soup, And what I didn't know is that purple foods have some phytonutrients that are tremendously helpful that no other foods have. So I got very into how can I eat purple foods. And since I still hate eggplant, I found the purple potato soup. I thought, I can make this. And that began my cooking career. Sean Stevenson's Eat Smarter. David Perlmutter, there should be an L in there, Perlmutter. He's actually I think he's a neurologist, but he's done a lot on the relationship between food and brain function. Of course, we know that a lot of people have gluten intolerances, and the grain that we get is hybridized to a degree that is very unnatural. I know people who can eat bread in France, but cannot eat bread in America. So interesting. And then I love this guy, Max Lugavere, and his book, Genius Foods. So most of what I shared with you came from these books. I also am pretty sure that fasting is one of the most beneficial things you can possibly do to extend your life, improve your brain function, improve your attitude and emotional condition, and keep your body weight where you want it to be. Fasting has been known for a long time as a cure for disease. And one of the reasons for this is because we're constantly getting new cells and having old cells that should die and go away. It's called apoptosis, right? But unfortunately, because we eat the way we do and live the life we live, we don't have the apoptosis happening the way it should. And so we have circling around in our body cells that should be self-destructing and going away, hanging out, creating inflation. Oh, that happens at the government level, creating inflammation and disease. Now, when you stop eating for a while, and that can be anywhere from, 12 hours to 5 days, whatever you want to call it. But when you stop eating, several really interesting things happen. The first thing that happens is there's a release of ghrelin. Now, ghrelin is a hormone that does many things, but the most obvious one that you're aware of is it signals hunger. The job of ghrelin is to remind you to eat food, as if you were going to forget. But it's basically periodically, it says, okay, you're getting a little low on your reserves, you'd better eat. And so it stimulates in your body, which your brain then translates into, I'm hungry. And the funny thing is, it's your brain doing it, but you feel it in your belly, right? So, but another thing that ghrelin does is it also stimulates apoptosis, or what we also would call autophagy, which is self-eating. So the body has this amazing capacity. When you stop giving it nutrients, it starts looking for sources of energy. And the first place it goes to look, the ghrelin tells it, go look for the cells that aren't doing anything. Let's go get these zombie cells and chew them up and make them back into energy. And that's why it's autophagy, Greek for self-eating. So as soon as you stop eating and you get hungry, your body starts to then scavenge around and say, what can we recycle here? What can we pull that we could use to provide energy? And so you get an immediate improvement in autophagy right there. Then, of course, the next thing that happens is your body starts to convert fat into energy. That's the job of your liver, right? Your liver converts excess sugar into fat, and then it converts fat back into sugar, and so you get that. But when your liver goes to get the stored up fat that you have, it puts it into your blood at a pretty stable level, right? So you actually can get a stable blood sugar level after a period of fasting. Now, some people have naturally low blood sugar. Like I have one daughter, and her highest blood sugar is usually 60 or 70, which is really low. And I think she's been so low that she should be dead now, but obviously not. So she would have to be very, very careful about this. However, what I have noticed is that once you get past the initial period, right, and you the ghrelin reminds you, eat something, and you don't, then it gives up on you and goes and recycles some of your zombie cells, and then you have energy and mental clarity, and you can go for longer time. Then the ghrelin will appear again. Hey, it's time to eat. You should eat something if you can. And if you ignore it, it goes away and goes and recycles some more and tells the liver, start changing fat into sugars and keep this thing going here. And so what I have actually found is that not eating can help me keep a more stable energy level. But you have to retrain yourself to burn fat for fuel and not rely exclusively on blood sugar, mostly from carbohydrates. Another thing that happens with the fasting, and I put all three of these books up here. First book, Fast Like a Girl, Mindy Peltz. And that's because females have hormonal cycles, so they have to be sensitive to when and how long they fast, lest they mess up hormonal cycles and fertility issues. So she's the best one on that. Jason Fung, love that guy, The Complete Guide to Fasting. This one, Jay Richards, I really like this. I think this is the best book, especially for men, because he talks about the history of fasting, the physiological benefits of fasting, and then the spiritual leveraging that happens when you don't eat for a while. So I have experimented everywhere from doing intermittent fasting, eating only about 4 or 5 hours out of a day for almost a year. I did that. And then I've also done pretty long fasts, 3 and even 5 days. And so I see nothing but benefits here. And calorie restriction, we know you can extend the life of rodents if you feed them about 80% of the calories that they would normally eat on their own. So there's benefit to that as well. So getting the autophagy, very helpful. All right, lastly, we want to talk a little bit about the problems in the environment. Perhaps you've heard of the idea of leaky gut. And this is where, so the endothelium in the intestinal system is just 1 cell thick. It's really, really thin. And when you get permeability in the intestines, you get toxins that leach out into the bloodstream, and this causes all sorts of inflammation and bad disease. So you want to really protect the health of the endothelium in your digestive system. And you can do that with probiotics and with the right kind of oils and foods. But one of the problems is there's a very toxic substance that attacks those cells very viciously and can do a lot of damage in a short period of time. And that is this chemical glyphosate, otherwise known as Roundup, which unfortunately is still legal in this country. There are many countries in the world where it is not legal. But because we have Monsanto, the great chemical behemoth now owned by Bayer, they lobby the FDA so heavily that they just say our whole economy would collapse if we don't use glyphosate. And they use it on so many different crops. And in fact, I just saw an article recently about people who live near a golf course have higher levels of glyphosate and toxins because they spray golf courses to keep the weeds off. So you want to be careful of that. NSAIDs, Advil and Aleve, these can have some negative inflammatory actions. So they're supposed to be anti-inflammatory, but they have the negative effect on the gut. And then, of course, we see all sorts of things that can damage our digestion, the inflammatory diets of the SAD that we talked about. Stress can do it. Alcohol can do it. SIBO is small intestine bacterial overgrowth. All of these things we don't want. But we live in a world that makes it hard to avoid them, so we have to be diligent. This is why there are certain foods that are really important to buy organic foods. There is a group called the Environmental Working Group, ewg.org, and they have the Dirty Dozen. They also have the Clean 14 or something, Clean 15. And so you can find out what are the 12 most sprayed, least good unless you buy organic, and then what are the ones that don't matter. Ones that don't matter would be like avocados, right? Anything with a really thick skin that you take off isn't going to matter. So I don't spend money on organic avocados, but I would probably not eat any kind of strawberries unless I knew they were organic, just because they're so heavily sprayed. But there's your Dirty Dozen. Strawberries, spinach, kale, nectarines, apples, grapes, peppers, cherries, peaches, pears, celery, tomatoes. It's sad, but it doesn't have to be. You can buy organic. The other things that I might mention are endocrine disruptors in the environment. And so we see these contaminants. Some of these are they call them forever chemicals, meaning they just don't really ever get cleaned out of the system. Atrazine is probably one of the worst. But you see the BPA in the plastics, the phthalates in self-clean, a lot of cleaning products, parabens in soaps and lotions, glyphosate, or the Roundup in so much of the produce. Atrazine is an anti-mold thing that they use on mostly corn. Certain fish, high in mercury, farmed fish are generally not that great because they spend too much time eating their own stuff. So, it's a hard world to be in.
Also, like the plugins that people put in the fake smells, like the fragrances.
Oh, Febreze and all that.
The Glad plugin.
Yeah.
The car stuff.
Yep, that's all going to be pretty awful. Well, we've got EMF emissions, we've got lack of grounding, we've got noise pollution. All right, what might you, if you had a little extra resources, what might you spend some time on? I think a high quality water filtration system is absolutely essential. We have a reverse osmosis, but then you also get stripped of a lot of the chemicals. So you want to be sure and add in sodium, potassium, magnesium, electrolyte types of minerals into the water, or just drink them. Amber light bulbs for the house. I think it'd be so cool, like have it on a timer, and your timer is hooked up to the internet and it knows exactly when sunset is. And so your whole house just goes from big lights to amber lights around the floor, like instant nightclub. I think that would be, we see that in nonstick cookware, there's a lot of these toxic chemicals that chip off little by little. So high quality ceramic cookware and glass storage to avoid plastics. I think having some good exercise equipment, especially if you've got teenage boys around, it's one of the absolute best things you can get them doing. Start building some muscle, get dad to do it with them. And of course, we're only going to be motivated to pursue better health and hygiene and habits if we know why we're doing it. That's why education is so important. This is a longer slide thing than I thought. Anyway, we talk about stress and we talk about the problem of stress management, but really you can't manage stress so well. It's just going to hit you, right? So rather than stress management, we need to think resilience. So how do we become more resilient? And there's a word called hormesis. I don't know if you've ever heard this. I was delighted to learn this word. It basically translates into, if it doesn't kill you, it makes you tougher, right? And so this idea of stress and then our response to stress is to become stronger, right? That's how muscles build. You stress a muscle, you tear your muscle fibers, then it says, uh-oh, we're torn up, we need to rebuild. It opens up and you get more blood flow, you get temporary inflammation, and then while you're sleeping, all the little proteins go in and try to build up connections between the torn muscle fibers, and then you end up with more muscle fibers the next morning, or the next week, or however long it takes. So hormesis is that idea that if it doesn't kill you, make you tougher. Same thing like cold water plunging, saunas, things that stress the body, but then the reaction is, okay, now we are stronger as a result. I like this book, Atomic Habits. Anyone read this? Absolutely fantastic. I think every teenager, this should be on the reading list. Before you leave home, you will read Atomic Habits by James Clear. I read it and I was kind of happy because I thought, hey, I am doing a lot of this stuff and I can do some of this stuff even better. So, all right, here are some of my favorite podcasts. David Jockers, Ben Greenfield. Actually, he was a student, a writing student of mine when he was 15 years old, and we were living in Moscow, Idaho at the time. It's kind of fun. Gundry, he's up and down. Will Cole is a homeschool dad, and he spoke at the Virginia Convention recently. Tom DeLauer, Sten Ekberg, he's one of my absolute favorite guys. He's on YouTube, and he's got short little, really informational, really well done. He was a decathlete back in the 60s or something. Joseph Mercola, some of you may have heard of him. And then for the ladies, Cynthia seems to be one of the best ones for women's health and all that. All right, so I think that's about it. Thank you.